So right after we did our transition here at Grace Bible Church, people, pastors that I'm connected with across the country, around the world, friends, family, started asking, so what's next? What will you do next when your time is completed there? As you remember, in the transition, we had a marked time that I could stay up to. But if I wanted to and I believed it was time to consider something next, I was free to do that as well. And so, as I say, I love and I am so happy with what God has allowed me to do for over 2 years now in this role. But I think I now know what the next thing might be. In talking to fellow pastors who watched and heard about and saw our transition here, they could not believe that we could do that as a church and that it would be something that would even allow me to remain and be a part of that transition. And that's been an incredible blessing that God has given to us. But in light of that transition, some of my fellow pastors and friends ask me, have you ever heard of the role of an intentional transitional pastor? And I had never heard of that. But what intentional transitional pastoring is different than your typical interim pastor who serves a church while that church starts looking for their next pastor. But an intentional transitional interim pastor is someone who comes with a commitment to serve that church for 18 to 24 months to help them do a couple of things, to help them deal with the hurt and the loss of their pastor who was left. And sometimes their pastors leave on for good reasons, and there's no problem. Sometimes they leave and there's really been a lot of problems. So to go in as an intentional transitional interim pastor is to say, for the next 18 to 24 months, I'm going to help you deal with those hurts and losses and disappointments in the past. But more importantly, I'm going to help you walk through setting a vision and a plan for the future and what it looks like for your next pastor when you call him to be your shepherd. And see, this is very intentional, very purposeful. You serve as their preaching pastor for those 18 to 24 months. So you get to serve their congregation and teaching and preaching, but more specifically, meeting with their committees and their teams to help them look at and think about how to put the past where it needs to be and how to move forward and have a healthy church ready to welcome their new pastor. That's totally different than what happens in most churches. Particularly what happens is a pastor will say, if he does leave with a notification, I believe the Lord's calling me to go somewhere else, and I wanted you to know that we'll be leaving soon. And then the church is left in a lurch wondering, what do we do now? How do we go forward? And they immediately start scrambling, looking for putting together committees to start trying to find the next pastor. That may not be the best thing for them. They may need to deal with some of the things that have really been a problem in the past or losses and struggles about their pastor leaving so they can have a good, healthy church ready to welcome their next pastor. So that's what I believe God is calling Pam and I to next. I've already done the training for this, received certification in this, and I wanted you to know first and foremost as my family, my church family, because I don't want that to be something you hear about through the grapevine. I'll be producing a video that will be posted on social media called Transition Well, because that's the goal of an intentional transitional pastor, to help churches transition well. And I wouldn't want you to see that video out there and begin to start wondering, what is this about? Now, I know that whenever I share this with you this evening, that raises a lot of questions. Like, when will you be doing that? Where will you be going? Are you going to remain in Rabun County and live here? Well, the only one I really know the answer to right now, because I don't have the crystal ball of who's going to contact me, when I'm going to come to an agreement to work with the next church that I will work with. But I do know I'm going to remain in Rabun County. You're always going to be my family. You're always going to be our friends. And whether I'm in this church or I'm serving in another church, I'm going to be in this community so that I can actually be a part of your life and your world continually. I have committed to a 100-mile radius, which allows me the North Carolina area, parts of Georgia and South Carolina so that I could serve those areas and still live in my home and commute back and forth within a 100-mile radius. So it could be 20 miles from here. It could be 100 miles from here. But I know and I believe this is where God is leading Pam and I for the next step. All the details of who will serve those areas and different roles of ministry that I have served over these past few years, I'm confident that our leadership will do a fabulous job filling those slots. God will never leave us vacant with people to serve and do the work that He's called us to as a church. So I've kept Pastor Zach and the leadership in the loop on this whole thing. And so he's going to be able to take any questions now if you have any. And if you have more questions that he just can't answer, please feel free to come see me or Pam, as we would love to chat with you and just share our excitement about where the next thing is.